The next topic is CloudFront. We would be discussing over here what is CDN, that is Content Delivery Network, how CDN works, and what is CloudFront. So let us discuss about CDN first of all. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. Why this is used? Because the regular requests which are coming in, I want to cache the results of those requests so that I do not have to again and again hit the web server. So it is a geographically distributed network of servers that work together to deliver the content to the end users. The purpose of it is to reduce the latency and increase the speed of content delivery by bringing the content closer to the end users. So why these are edge services? Because we are bringing the content nearer to the user. So these uses the concept of edge locations that we discussed in our first module. So when any user requests the content, the CDN automatically directs the request to the closest server to the user. This reduces the time it takes for the content to travel from server to the user, resulting in the faster page load times and better user experience. For example, a request is being generated from America, okay, and we have hosted our S3 bucket into India. Okay, we have S3 bucket in India, and the request is coming from America. So if this request come all the way to S3 bucket over here and goes all the way back to America, then the round trip time is more. Latency will increase over here. What if I have the content of S3, let's say MP4 file that user is trying to fetch, which is a very huge MP4 file, in the nearest server to the user, somewhere in America itself. So now what will happen is my request would be going to that nearest server, it will fetch the content and come back. The RTT time is reducing over here, hence the latency will reduce and the speed of content delivery will increase drastically. So CDNs are commonly used to deliver static content such as images, videos, scripts, or style sheets. They are also used to distribute dynamic content such as web applications and APIs. CDN will help the website owner to reduce their server loads, improve their website availability, and provide better scalability and the performance. So that is the use of CDN. So how it will work basically. So if we see, the CDN would be working on these different 8 steps. So first of all, the user will request for any kind of resource such as web page, image, or video from a website or application. The user's request would be first directed to the CDN's edge server, which is closest to their geographical location. And how this would be decided? The closeness of server through IP address. Okay, so based on the IP address of the user's DNS resolver, we can understand what would be the nearest edge server to them. If the edge server already has a cached copy of the content, then it will return it directly without the user's request forwarded to the origin server. Origin server means the original location where the data is located. Okay, an edge server is used for caching the data. So if the edge server is already having the data cached, then we would return it directly from the edge server itself. If the TTL did not expire, here also we have the concept of TTL, that is time to live. Okay, if it is not expired, then it will be directly served to the user. If the edge server does not have the cached copy of the requested resource, Then it will forward the request to the origin server, which is the website server or the storage system. The origin server would be responding back to the request with the requested resource, obviously, which is sent back to the edge server. Okay. So what edge server will do is, edge server would be caching the resource and serves it to user. So it will also cache the resource which is returned back from the origin server. So in future, if that request is being received, then it can directly serve it from the edge server instead of going back to the origin server. If other user requests the same resource, okay, the edge server can serve it directly from the cache now because it is already having the cache copy with it. So what will happen? We are reducing the load on origin server first thing, and we are also improving the response time. So the round trip time and the latency would be less. CDN will provide us with additional features such as load balancing. We can have the encryption in transit. We have DDoS protection, and we have WAF to improve the performance, security, and availability. So these were the 7 steps that are being followed when we use the CDN. So what is CloudFront now? CloudFront is actually the CDN service which is provided by AWS. So it is the web service that will accelerate the distribution of the content, of your content. It will be caching your static as well as the dynamic content, including HTML pages, CSS, JavaScript, image files, video files, etc. CloudFront uses the network of data centers which are there on the edge locations to deliver the content with the lowest possible delay. So when a user will be requesting the content that CloudFront serves, the request is directed to the edge location instead of the origin web server. If the content is not there in the location, then CloudFront would be retrieving it from the origin server. It can be S3 bucket or a web server. Okay, so it would be fetching it from the origin server and it would be then delivering it to the user. So there are some key features and benefits of using CloudFront. What are those features? It is having the global network. Because we know that there are almost more than 410 point of presence location, that is, the edge locations and all. So the edge location located around the world, the network of edge location is really very wide, which enables user to deliver the content with low latency and high transfer speeds to the users in different geographical locations. Then it caches the data. So the importance of cache is low latency as well as reduced load on origin server. Then there is security. CloudFront can integrate with AWS security services such as AWS Shield or WAF, that is Web Application Firewall. That will allow us, or those services would protect us from DDoS attacks and other common security threats. It is cost effective as you are using pay as you go pricing. So there are no upfront fees, making it cost effective solution for delivering the content globally. So how does this work? How to configure it? So the first thing that you have to do it over here is Amazon CloudFront will allow you to specify the origin servers. So say what is your origin server? Is it S3 or your own HTTP server from which your website files can be retrieved? So you have to select that. Once you have selected that, it is distributed to the users from the CloudFront's edge locations worldwide. So these origin servers store the original and definitive versions of your objects such as web pages, images, or media files. You can make these objects publicly readable or keep them private and control who can access them. So it's not compulsory to make your object public for CloudFront to access it. Okay, you can have the controlled access control there. Then you would be creating the CloudFront distribution, which tells CloudFront which origin server to retrieve your files from and specify other details such as logging all details, TTL, etc. Then CloudFront will assign a domain name to your new distribution and send its configuration to all the edge locations or point of present locations where it will be caching the copies of your file. So this is how you have to configure your CloudFront. Before we go to Outpost, I have one diagram that we would be seeing on the whiteboard. Okay, so here we understood that the first step basically is to decide on the distributions, right? We have to, decide on the origin, that where our origin server is. So what will happen is, here is our developer, okay? And we can have our origin server S3, or we can have it in the form of HTTP server. So this is HTTP server. The first step would be to define the origin server. Right. After doing that, the second step was basically to store the files on this particular servers, right, or to the origin servers. So we would be storing some files over here in S3 or HTTP server. Then the third step was we can make these objects publicly readable. So that was about the access. And then we create the CloudFront distribution, which will tell the CloudFront which origin server to retrieve your files from. So whatever you use, okay, that distribution would be created. So the third step would be about web distribution, okay, in CloudFront. So this distribution will tell that whether to fetch the data from S3 or HTTP server. So once our distribution is created, okay, the CloudFront will assign the domain name to this new distribution that was created. It will go back to the developer, the domain name that was being created. And this was the third step. This is the fourth step. The domain name would be returned to the developer. And lastly, what will happen? The distribution configuration that CloudFront did, okay, would be sent out to all the locations. So these are the 5 steps that we have. First is to decide the origin. Second is to put the data or files over there. The third is to create the web distribution. The fourth is CloudFront would be sending the DNS name to the developer, which it created for that distribution. And the fifth step is it will send all the configuration detail to the edge locations. So this is the 5-step process that we have when we want to configure our CloudFront CDN.